Let's begin by clicking on the main menu, Guides, then type in 2 words, Passage, and then Exegesis. Located in the menu below under Workflows, click Passage Exegesis. The window's opened up at the left. Let's go ahead and left-click the border at the right and drag that all the way to fill up our layout. Let's type in Romans 4:5 for our passage and press Enter. And let's make the window a little bit wider here so we can see the full menu. Now, what I like about passage exegesis is it introduces you to the many steps that are involved to thoroughly study a passage. In step 1, it begins with the traditional reading of the Bible. Now, you certainly should read your current preferred translation multiple times. It's recommended to read the passage in other versions. Now, I would first start with literal translations, and maybe expand to some others so you can see the word choice changes and what the sense of the passage is trying to convey with these other translations. Step 2, explore the larger context. Now, this is really important to understand near and far context. Near context is those passages surrounding the verse you're studying. And as you move outwardly to, let's say, the paragraph, to the chapter, to the book, and to the whole Bible, you're now moving into far context. This is really key because a passage means what it means in the context that it is placed. And so with Logos, we can look at some tools to help us understand the immediate context. It also has a step where it says evaluate the propositional outlines. These are useful tools that can help you understand how a paragraph is put together and what it's conveying. And then the third is examine the historical context. This is to help us understand when the passage was written. What did the people understand and believe at the time the text was written? Now, step 3 is to look at the type of literature. This is significant because when you go in to interpret a text, you need to know ahead of time what the genre is. For example, how I study historical literature is going to be different how I study, let's say, wisdom literature, or even poetry, or apocalyptic like Revelation. There are different rules you have to take into account when you look at this different type of literature. So Logos will guide you through this by establishing the passage genre, examine the literary types, and be sensitive to figurative language, which is so important. So Logos can give you those tools. Now, once you've worked through that, you need to identify the significant people in the text. And so Logos will give you that. It does draw a distinction in this methodology between people and supernatural beings. That would be God, the Son, the Spirit, and then angels as well. And you should make that distinction in your studies. Then in step 5, we look at the passage events. This is pretty neat because sometimes you're studying, let's say, the book of Acts. There's a lot of events that are taking place. Then in step 6, we're going to dig deeper into important words, and you've seen this tool before. Step number 7 is going to take a look at cross-references. This is where you're trying to understand this verse in light of all the scriptures. And Logos gives you a couple tools to do that. We have the important passages. We've seen this before, as well as parallel passages. These are really helpful, especially if you're studying the Gospels or 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, where there's a lot of repeating of information, even like Deuteronomy and some of the other books of the Pentateuch. Now, once you've completed the cross-references, you pretty much have completed all the steps that's using just biblical information. And this is a good time in step 8 to summarize what you've learned, and Logos will guide you through creating an exegetical outline. An exegetical outline is simply explaining what the text is doing and saying. This now brings us to step number 9, which is the commentaries. This is a very important step to make sure you are checking your work, correcting any insights that may be incorrect, or being introduced to some ideas that maybe you overlooked. Once you've done that, you're really ready for step number 10, which is application. And Logos gives you 4 steps here. You summarize the passage. This is really good and helpful. You revise your exegetical outline based on what you've learned in your readings. Then you determine the theological principle. And again, as we've shared in other videos, the theological principle is that timeless truth that regardless of your culture and the time you live in is still applicable. And then lastly is establish the primary application of your passage. If you're going to teach and preach, it's so important that you prioritize. There's lots of little lessons in every passage, But there is always a primary lesson. That's what you want to bring out. That's what all the passages are seeking to point you to, and that's most helpful to the audience. And then lastly, step 11 is an opportunity for you to share this information with others. So if you're looking to grow your skill set in Bible study, take advantage of the passage exegesis workflow. Let's go ahead and click here on Close All Panels to close this window.